The afternoon light came in flat and copper, colored through the high windows of Carter's Auto and Repair, the kind of October light that made everything look like it was already fading into memory. Dried leaves pressed against the base of the roll-up door. A transistor radio on the workbench was murmuring something about traffic on the interstate. Daniel Carter had his back to all of it. He was lying on a creeper board beneath a 2009 Silverado, his right hand working a torque wrench, with the kind of patience that looks effortless from the outside and costs everything from the inside. His knuckles were cracked and darkened with engine grease that no amount of orange hand soap would fully remove, not anymore, not after 10 years of this. There was a rhythm to the way he worked. Reach, find, feel, turn. No wasted movement, no hesitation. The shop was his had been since he bought it from old Ray Whitfield 6 years back, paying the back half in installments that had sometimes come very close to not arriving. It occupied a narrow lot on Delwood Avenue, in the industrial fringe of Hartfield, Ohio, sandwiched between a tire distributor and a storage facility. The sign above the bay door was hand-lettered in black on white, and had not been repainted since Ray's time. The parking lot crumbled at its edges. The waiting area had 4 plastic chairs, a coffee machine that sometimes worked, and a stack of hunting magazines from 2019. Nothing about it announced anything extraordinary. That was precisely how Daniel Carter preferred it. He rolled out from under the truck, sat up, and pulled a clean rag from the back pocket of his coveralls. He wiped his hands in the unhurried way of a man who had nowhere more important to be, though that was not entirely true. In 45 minutes, he needed to be outside Pinecrest Elementary on Lark Street, which was 7 minutes away if he took the back roads. Lily got anxious if the school loop emptied out and he was not yet there. She would stand on the sidewalk with her backpack pulled to her chest, scanning the parking lot. He knew this because Miss Patterson had once called him to gently mention it, and the image had lived in him ever since. He stood, wiped down the torque wrench, and placed it back on the pegboard with the precision of a man who returns every tool to its shadow. 8 years old. Lily Carter was 8 years old, and had recently informed him, with great sincerity, that she intended to one day build a car better than any car that had ever been built. He had not discouraged her. He had, in fact, quietly driven to the library on a Tuesday evening and returned with 4 books on aerodynamics and 1 on the history of combustion engines, which she had begun reading with a flashlight under her blanket when she thought he was asleep. He had not told her he knew. He thought about her now, as he moved to the workbench and filled out the service ticket for the Silverado. There was a crack in his knuckle on the index finger of his right hand, the kind that opened up every autumn and refused to heal until February. He pressed his thumb against it absently. His assistant, a 22-year-old named Marcus Webb who did oil changes and alignments and ate lunch like he was in a competition, stuck his head through the side door. "Hey, Danny. Lady on the phone wants to know if we do same-day service on European cars. Depends on the car. She didn't say what kind. Tell her yes, and ask her what kind." Marcus disappeared. Daniel pulled a bottle of water from the mini-fridge below the bench. He had not eaten since breakfast, which had been a bowl of oatmeal standing over the kitchen sink at 6:15 because Lily had slept late and needed to be rushed. He was used to meals that happened in the margins of other things. Marcus returned. "She said it's a Ferrari." "A pause." She said it like she expected that to mean something. Marcus added. "It does mean something," Daniel said. He recapped the water bottle. "Tell her we close at 6 and she can bring it in." Marcus tilted his head. "You sure?" "I looked her up while she was on hold. I think it's that Victoria Hale, the one who runs Hale Strategic. They do, like, acquisitions and tech stuff. She's on the cover of..." "Marcus." "Yeah? Tell her we close at 6. Marcus went back to the phone. Daniel looked at his hands, then at the pegboard of tools, then out at the strip of gray sky visible through the open bay door. He rolled his neck once, slowly, until it cracked. "A Ferrari." He said nothing further. But something behind his eyes, not quite a smile, and not quite its opposite, shifted almost imperceptibly. He had work to do before 6. Victoria Hale arrived at 4:47 in a vehicle that was less a car and more a statement of intent. The Ferrari SF90 Stradale was the color of arterial red. a shade so precise and deliberate that it could only have been specified by someone who understood exactly what it communicated. The engine note arrived before the car did. A low, composed growl that shortened the breath of Marcus Webb, who was sweeping the parking lot and stopped mid-stroke to watch it pull in. The woman who stepped out was 36 years old and looked like someone who had given up compromising in her mid-20s and never found a reason to resume. She wore a charcoal-structured coat over a cream blouse, dark trousers with a knife-edge crease, and low-heeled leather shoes that cost more than Marcus made in a month. Her dark blonde hair was pulled back at the nape of her neck, with the kind of effortlessness that required significant effort. She wore no expression of nervousness, but she did not look happy to be here. She stood beside the car and looked at the shop. Her face did not move much, but her eyes did the work. They traveled from the chipped asphalt to the hand-lettered sign, from the plastic chairs visible through the waiting area window to the oil-stained concrete floor of the open bay. The assessment took perhaps 4 seconds and arrived at a conclusion that she did not bother to conceal. Her assistant, Damon, thin, diligent, suffering from the permanent low-grade stress of working for Victoria Hale, came around from the passenger side and stood slightly behind her. "This is the place," he offered, somewhat unnecessarily. "I can see that." She looked down at her phone, at the note he had sent her earlier. 4 other shops declined or were unavailable. This one has a reputation in certain circles, though the online presence is essentially non-existent. Define certain circles. Collectors, mostly. There's a forum a few mentions. One post says the owner fixed an issue on a Pagani that 2 dealers couldn't diagnose. Victoria looked up from the phone. She looked back at the shop. A Pagani. That's what the post says. She looked at the car. The SF90 had been giving her trouble for 3 weeks, an intermittent hesitation on cold starts that deepened into a throttle irregularity under load, accompanied by an error code that the authorized Ferrari dealership in Columbus had diagnosed twice and fixed 0 times. The second visit had cost her 11 hours and $1,400 and produced the same problem and a different excuse. She had 2 board meetings this week, a flight to Zurich on Friday, and 0 tolerance for machines that did not perform. She walked into the shop. The bay was occupied by an older pickup truck, and, beyond it, a work area lined with metal shelving, loaded with parts, fluids, and equipment. The radio was playing something low. It smelled of oil and metal, and, faintly, of coffee. Daniel Carter was standing at the bench. He had heard her come in, and he turned without urgency. He was taller than she had expected, and quieter looking. Late 30s, maybe 40. Strong build. The kind earned by work rather than effort. Dark hair, a little long. The coveralls were clean enough. They had been clean that morning, but the accumulated stain of the work was in the creases of his hands and the faint darkness at his collar. He looked at her with gray eyes that gave nothing away. "Miss Hale?" he said. "Yes." She looked around the shop again. Not cruelly, or maybe cruelly, without meaning to be. "This is your shop." "It is. You service European vehicles." "I do." She held his gaze for a moment. "You understand what I've brought you. A Ferrari SF90 Stradale," he said. 2022, I'd guess, based on the color. "What's the problem?" She told him. The hesitation. The throttle irregularity. The error codes. She spoke quickly and precisely, the way she delivered briefs to her team, stripping out anything superfluous. He listened without taking notes, which mildly irritated her. She was used to people writing things down when she spoke. When she finished, he said, "Pull it into the far bay." She looked at the floor of the far bay. She looked at the car outside. "There's some concern about, the floor is clean. I'll put down paper if you want." "A beat. I'll have Damon pull it in," she said. He turned back to the bench without another word. Victoria stood in the middle of the waiting area and felt, for the first time in a long while, slightly off balance. She was not accustomed to mechanics who did not become visibly different people in her presence. Most people became different people in her presence. It was not something she sought. It simply happened. The wedged it all. She did not know what to do with that. While Damon moved the car into the far bay with the careful attention of a man handling someone else's irreplaceable object, Victoria walked through the small waiting area and stood near the open bay door. She watched Daniel Carter pull a rolling cart of tools toward the Ferrari, with the same unhurried pace he seemed to apply to everything. "I'll be honest," she said. He looked up, waiting. "I'm here because I've run out of options in this city that I'd consider competent. Not because I have confidence in." She gestured, not unkindly, but not gently, at the surroundings. "Okay," he said. "Okay, that's fine." He crouched beside the front of the car and looked at it the way you look at something you are about to have a conversation with. "You don't need to have confidence in the shop. You just need the car fixed." She crossed her arms. "The dealer in Columbus told me it was the engine management software. They reflashed it twice. Was the problem different after the second flash?" She paused. "No. So, it wasn't the software." He opened the door and reached in to pull the hood release. And then something odd happened. He stood for a moment beside the car and simply placed both hands flat on the front quarter panel. Closed his eyes briefly, as if listening. It lasted perhaps 2 seconds, and might have been nothing, might have been a man thinking, but it looked like something else entirely. It looked like someone making contact. Victoria said nothing. Marcus, who was standing in the corner pretending to inventory filters, watched this with the expression of someone who has seen it before and still finds it interesting. "You think you can actually fix this?" Victoria said. It was not entirely a question. "I think I can diagnose it," he said. "I'll know more in 40 minutes. The dealer took 4 hours." "I know." He opened the hood and leaned in, and his entire attention disappeared into the engine bay. She watched him for a moment. Then, "You're not going to connect it to a diagnostic computer?" "Not yet. That's how modern engine faults are, Miss Hale." He said it without looking up, not rudely. Firmly. The way a surgeon might ask you not to speak during a procedure. "I'll connect it if I need to. Give me the time." She inhaled through her nose. She sat down in one of the plastic chairs, pulled out her phone, and began reading an email chain about the Zurich prep brief. 10 minutes passed. 20. At 32 minutes, she looked up to find Daniel standing at the driver's side door again. This time, with a small hand-fabricated tool, she had never seen a short, L-shaped piece of polished steel, custom by the look of it, attached to what appeared to be a modified torque adapter. He was examining the edge of the intake manifold housing, his face very still. "What is that tool?" she said. "Something I made. For this car specifically? For this type of fault specifically?" She set her phone down. "What fault?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "The issue isn't the software, and it isn't the throttle body. There's a microfracture in the secondary intake resonator housing here." He indicated a location she could not see from where she sat. "It's causing a variable vacuum leak that only opens under specific temperature and load conditions. The ECU compensates most of the time, which is why it looks like an electrical fault. But it isn't." She stood and walked to the car. She leaned in beside him, following his finger. The dealer ran a vacuum test. Static vacuum test at room temperature. That wouldn't catch this. It only presents when the housing is warm and the engine is under 2,000 RPM and above 70% throttle. She looked at him. "How did you know to check for that?" A small pause. "I've seen it before," he said, and turned back to the engine. The next part happened in a focused silence. Daniel worked with an economy of motion that Victoria found, against her better judgment, difficult to look away from. He did not rush. He did not narrate what he was doing or perform awareness of being watched. His hands moved with the precision of someone who had, over a very long time and through great effort, distilled complex knowledge into pure instinct, the way a concert pianist's hands know the keys, without the brain announcing each note. He removed a section of the secondary intake system with a sequence of movements, so practiced they seemed choreographed. He identified the fracture hairline, barely visible without magnification, and confirmed it with a dye-penetrant method he mixed himself from components on his shelf. He fabricated a micro-patch from a matching alloy, mated surfaces, sealed with thermal compound, and torqued the housing back into place by feel. Checking against his specifications from memory, he did not once consult a service manual. Marcus had given up the pretense of inventorying filters. He sat on an upturned crate and watched. Damon, outside in the parking lot taking a call, periodically looked through the open bay door with an expression of cautious interest. Victoria stood off to the side with her arms still crossed, but her posture had changed without her fully noticing. The aggressive forward lean was gone. She was watching. She had overseen operations in 17 countries. She had sat in boardrooms where engineers presented solutions to problems worth hundreds of millions of dollars. She understood competence, not the performance of it, but the real thing, the kind you can feel when it's in the room. It had a quality to it, a specific gravity. She was feeling it now, and she did not like what that meant, which was that she had walked in here with the wrong assumptions and the wrong tone. And she was not someone who enjoyed being wrong. At 41 minutes, Daniel stood straight, picked up a clean rag, and began wiping down the edge of the engine bay where his hands had rested. "Start it," he said. Victoria looked at him. Then she got in the car. The SF-90 turned over on the first try. The idle was smooth, not just functional, but smooth in the way it should have been from the factory. The kind of smooth that costs $350,000 and is supposed to be guaranteed. She let it sit for a moment, then brought the revs up. Nothing. No hesitation. No irregularity. She sat in the car for a longer moment than was strictly necessary. She got out. "You're telling me," she said, and her voice had shifted in a way she could not prevent, a fraction lower and less certain, that 2 authorized Ferrari service centers and their factory-trained technicians missed a hairline fracture in the... They were looking for software faults. Software faults are easier to find and more profitable to fix. "I'm not criticizing them," he said. "That's just the incentive structure." She looked at the car. She looked at him. "What do I owe you?" "Marcus will write it up. Parts and labor. Same as anything else." She opened her mouth. She had been preparing, somewhere in the back of her mind, a response to the kind of inflated bill that occasionally followed the deployment of extraordinary competence, a number designed to extract value from a moment of dependence. She had her counter ready. He turned back to his bench. She recalibrated. "That's it?" she said. "You need anything else looked at while you're here?" A pause. "No," she said. "Then we're done." He began cleaning his tools. Victoria Hale stood in the middle of a small, unfashionable auto shop in industrial Hartfield, Ohio, beside a fixed Ferrari that 3 professional dealerships had failed to repair, and experienced the rare and deeply uncomfortable sensation of not knowing what to say next. She had been about to say something dismissive when he'd first started something about duct tape and luck, and she had not said it, and she was glad she hadn't. But the impulse had been there, and she knew it, and it sat in her chest like something swallowed wrong. She said, quietly, "You're very good at this." He glanced back at her, brief. "It's just the work," he said. The bill came to $480. Victoria looked at it for a moment. The repair that Columbus Ferrari had charged her $1,400 to not fix had been resolved permanently for less than $500. She handed Marcus her card and said nothing. He ran it. She signed. Normal commerce, occurring in abnormal circumstances. She was standing by the Ferrari, coat on, preparing to leave, when her phone rang. The caller ID read, Ferrari SPA Italy. She stared at it. In 5 years of owning Ferrari vehicles, in the course of warranty, claims and service histories, and one collector event at Maranello, she had never received a direct call from Ferrari Italy. They communicated through the regional distributor, through the authorized service network, through layers of formal correspondence. A direct call from headquarters was, she answered, "Miss Hale. This is Roberto Conti, head of Global Owner Relations. I apologize for the unusual contact. We've been monitoring certain warranty flags in our network. Your vehicle was flagged twice in Columbus for a recurring fault that was resolved each time without root cause correction. We became concerned, as this is an SF-90 with our extended care program. Our engineers ran a remote diagnostic on the vehicle 30 minutes ago and found something unexpected. Said, the fault has been corrected, he said. And not in any way we've seen from our authorized network. The repair method, specifically, the secondary intake resonator patch, and the compound used, matches a technique documented in one of our internal engineering files. A file that was authored in 2013 and archived when the engineer who wrote it left the company. A pause. We'd like to know who repaired your vehicle. Victoria's eyes moved slowly to her. I bay door, where Daniel Carter was visible in the amber light of the shop, returning tools to the pegboard with careful, deliberate hands. Why? She said. Because the technique is proprietary. It was developed by a member of our Maranello powertrain team. No one outside that team should have it. If this individual has independent knowledge of this method, we'd very much like to speak with them. Victoria looked at the shop sign. The hand-lettered white-on-black letters. Carter's Auto and Repair. She lowered the phone from her ear. She walked back into the bay. There's someone on the phone who wants to speak with you, she said. Her voice was different now. Not softer, it was not in her nature to go soft, but stripped of the layer of assessment she usually kept over everything. Just words. He turned from the pegboard. He looked at the phone in her outstretched hand. Something moved across his face. Very briefly. The kind of thing that is gone before you can name it. He took the phone. Hello, he said. A long pause. His eyes dropped to the floor. His chest rose and fell once, slowly, with the patience of a man who has had a long time to prepare for moments he hoped would not arrive. Yes, he said. This is Daniel Carter. The shop was very quiet. The radio had fallen to static. Marcus had stopped moving entirely. Victoria stood in the center of the bay, watching the man with her phone at his ear, and felt something she had not felt in years in a professional context, which was the sensation of having badly, fundamentally misread a situation. The call lasted 9 minutes. Victoria watched every second of it. She watched his posture, the way he held himself when he first answered, which was closed and guarded, and the way something in his shoulders changed as the call went on. Like ice giving slightly at the edge, she watched his face, which gave very little but gave enough. She watched him listen more than he spoke. And when he did speak, it was in the shorthand of a man confirming things the other person already knew. At one point, the voice on the other end said something longer, and Daniel turned very slightly away. And she saw his jaw tighten. When he ended the call, he held the phone for a moment before turning back to her. He offered it without ceremony. Thank you, he said. She took the phone. She waited. He turned back to the pegboard. Mr. Carter, she said. He paused. I believe, she said carefully, that I am owed an explanation. Or not owed. That's not the right word. But I would like one. If you're willing. A long pause. The kind that makes people nervous. I'm not sure what you want explained, he said. The phone call. The technique. The way you fixed that car. She paused. The tool you made. He looked at the L-shaped piece of polished steel on the bench. As if he'd forgotten it was there. I used to work for Ferrari, he said. The sentence came out flat, without preamble or drama. The way you might say I used to live in a different city. In Maranello, I was part of the powertrain engineering team for 8 years. The technique I use today, I developed it. We had a recurring fault on the SF90 prototype series during development testing. The secondary intake housing was the culprit. I wrote the diagnostic protocol and the repair method. He stopped. Victoria waited. He said, I left in 2018. Why? The word came out before she'd decided to ask it. She almost pulled it back. It was not her business. She did not ask personal questions in professional contexts. She had a policy, but she did not pull it back. My wife died, he said. Car accident. February 2018. Our daughter was 3 months old. The shop held the silence. I wasn't going back to Italy, he said. I wasn't going anywhere. I came home to Ohio. This is where I grew up and I started this shop. He looked at the pegboard, not at her. It was what I knew how to do with my hands. Victoria looked at him and did not say anything for a moment. She had a great many words available to her. She spent her professional life in high-velocity communication, quick pivots, calibrated language. In this moment, all of it felt insufficient, and she had the unusual experience of simply standing in a room with another person's grief without trying to manage it. "I'm sorry," she said. "About your wife." He nodded once. The nod of a man who has received this condolence many times and means it each time he accepts it, but has learned to carry the weight of it quickly. "The people on the phone," she said. "Ferrari, they want me to come back." He said it the way someone describes weather. "It is raining. They want me to come back." Consulting, initially. Then a full engineering position, if I want it. "What did you say?" For the first time since the conversation began, he looked directly at her. There was something in the look that she could not categorize, which was unusual. She was good at reading people. "I told them I'd think about it," he said. Before she could respond, the sound of running feet on pavement came from outside light. Quick, the specific rhythm of a child, and then a small figure appeared at the edge of the open bay door, backpack bouncing, hair escaped from a ponytail, cheeks flushed from running across the parking lot. "Daddy," Lily Carter said. "Marcus let me in the front, but I had to wait because I knew you were busy, but you said you'd be done by 5 and it's 5:15, so technically..." She stopped. She had registered the stranger. Victoria looked at the girl. The girl looked at Victoria with large, direct eyes that evaluated the situation with unsettling efficiency. "Hi," Lily said. "Hello," Victoria said. Lily looked at the Ferrari in the bay. Her eyes widened in a way that had nothing to do with wealth or status, and everything to do with engineering. "Is that an SF-90? Victoria glanced at Daniel, who had reached out without looking and caught his daughter's backpack strap to keep her from walking directly into the car. "It is," Victoria said. "The hybrid drivetrain on that is incredible," Lily said seriously. "I read about it. It has 3 motors. 2 on the front axle and 1 in the gearbox." She paused. "Did you know the front axle motors can run independently for torque vectoring? That's really cool." A silence. Victoria Hale, who ran a $200 million acquisition firm, who had been in the room with prime ministers and tech founders, looked at an 8-year-old girl who had just explained torque vectoring in a used auto shop in Ohio and felt, for the second time in one afternoon, completely disarmed. "I didn't know you knew that," she said. "My dad explained it," Lily said simply. "He explains everything." Victoria did not leave immediately. She had meant to. She had, in fact, meant to leave 40 minutes ago. Before the phone call. Before any of this. She had a dinner with a portfolio company CEO at 7 and a briefing package to review before then. She stayed because Lily was asking questions about the SF-90 and because Daniel was answering them in a tone she had not heard him use with anyone else open. A little warmer, patient in a way that came from love rather than obligation, and because watching a man who worked in silence and sharp, careful competence become someone else entirely in the presence of his daughter was, unexpectedly, worth the missed 30 minutes. She was standing near the bench when he glanced over and caught her watching. She did not look away. "You have a daughter," she said. It was not a question. "Obviously," he said. A hint of something not quite humor, but its edge. "She knows more about automotive engineering than most adults." "She reads," he said. "I encourage that." "The Ferrari offer," Victoria said. "You'd have to relocate." "Yes. Back to Italy, or wherever they needed me." Victoria considered this. She was standing in the man's workplace. She had been, for the first portion of this afternoon, condescending toward him in a way that she was only now taking full inventory of, and the inventory was not flattering. She had looked at the sign and the cracked asphalt and the plastic chairs and made a decision about the value inside. She had been a professional her entire adult life, and she had done the thing that professionals were supposed to be above. She picked up a clean rag from the stack on the bench, set it back down. "I'm sorry," she said, "for earlier, the way I spoke when I came in." He looked at her. "You don't have to." "I do," she said. "I looked at this place and I decided what it was. That was my mistake." Not yours. She paused. I'm not someone who apologizes frequently. I want that to mean something. He was quiet for a moment. Okay, he said. Okay, I heard you. She studied his face. That's it? What else should it be? She had no answer for that. She found, to her own surprise, that she did not need one. The Ferrari offer aside, she said. Have you considered your expertise? What you did today? The knowledge you have? There are people who know I'm here, he said. Word gets around in certain circles, as your assistant put it. I get the work I want to take. I don't advertise. You don't advertise, she repeated slowly. No. She looked around the shop one more time, not the way she had the first time, as an assessment of deficiency, but as an honest look at a place. The pegboard of tools in their correct shadows, the clean bench, the service tickets hung in a row, the small photograph stuck to the frame of the high window, which she had not noticed before, and which showed a younger Daniel Carter in different clothes, standing in front of what was unmistakably a factory floor, surrounded by machinery, smiling in the way people smile when the work is going well. Is that Marinello? She said. He looked at the photograph. Yes. She turned back to him. What was it like? A pause. Not a reluctant pause, a remembering one, like living inside the thing you care most about, he said. Before other things came along that you cared more about. She looked at him for a moment. Lily appeared between them, having apparently decided that the adult conversation was going on too long. Holding a granola bar and a paperback book about fluid dynamics that she had taken from her backpack. Daddy, can she stay for dinner? Lily said. Lily, we have pasta, Lily said to Victoria, with the diplomatic gravity of a small ambassador. It's good. Daddy makes it from scratch. Victoria looked at the child. She looked at Daniel, who was studying a fixed point on the opposite wall, with the careful neutrality of a man actively not influencing an outcome. I have a meeting, Victoria said. Oh, Lily said. A pause. Another time, Victoria said. She was not sure where that came from. She did not make promises to children. She did not make open-ended social commitments to people she had met that afternoon. She did not do any of the things she apparently did when standing in a small Ohio auto shop at the end of an October afternoon, with engine oil in the air, and a girl looking at her with expectant eyes. Lily nodded seriously, apparently filing this under commitments received. Okay, she said. Another time. In the weeks that followed, things changed slowly, the way real things change without announcement, without ceremony, in the accumulation of small facts that you only recognize as a pattern in retrospect. Daniel called Ferrari back. He agreed to a consulting arrangement. 2 days a month, remote, with occasional travel, only if Lily could come, and only in her school holidays. They had agreed without pushback, which told him something about how much they wanted the arrangement. The fee was significant. He put it in an account he had opened when Lily was born, and had not touched since, the one labeled, Education, whatever she wants. He did not change anything about the shop. Marcus got a raise. The sign remained hand-lettered. A different kind of car began to appear in the lot every few weeks. Not because anything was advertised, Daniel still had no website, but because word had reached a certain kind of owner, the kind who had a vehicle with a problem that no one else could solve and who had, after exhausting formal channels, been given a name and an address on Delwood Avenue in Hartfield. They came from Columbus, from Cincinnati, from Pittsburgh, once from Chicago. They arrived with cars worth between $60,000 and $800,000, and they left without their problems. Daniel treated each of them with the same level of interest he gave the Silverado. Victoria Hale came back on a Wednesday in November, in a black Range Rover that had nothing wrong with it. She brought lunch. Daniel was in the bay, deep in an Aston Martin engine bay, when Marcus appeared in the doorway and said, the lady from the Ferrari thing is here. He came out with his hands in a rag. She was standing by the bay door in a coat and scarf, holding a bag from a restaurant downtown, the kind of place that did not have numbered items on the menu. The car doesn't need anything, she said. I checked 3 times. He looked at her. At the bag. I wanted to see, she said. And paused. And rearranged what she had been about to say. I wanted to know how the consulting arrangement worked out. It's going fine. Good. She set the bag on the hood of the Range Rover. I brought food. You probably don't eat enough. He looked at the bag. He looked at her. You usually just buy things for strangers? You're not a stranger, she said. You're the man who fixed my car and inadvertently rebuilt my understanding of how to assess value. She paused. It was a significant service. The fee was too low. The fee was fine. I'm supplementing it with lunch. A beat. He nodded toward the side door. There's a table in the back. She picked up the bag and followed him without comment, stepping around the Aston Martin with the careful attention of someone who had already started learning the grammar of the space. They ate at the metal work table by the rear wall, the one he usually used for paperwork. With the parts catalogs pushed aside, she had brought enough food for 2 people, which meant she had planned this, which meant she had committed to the conversation before she arrived, which was, he noted, the kind of thing that required courage from someone whose method was usually to control the terms. She asked about the Ferrari consulting. He described it briefly. She asked about the fracture technique and whether he had documented it elsewhere. He said he had a set of private technical notes going back 15 years. She was quiet for a moment, pulling apart a piece of bread. I'd like to propose something, she said. Formally. He waited. I have a technology acquisition I'm building a consortium for. The underlying asset is an advanced materials company working on next-generation component manufacturing for high-performance vehicles. I need a technical advisor, not an investor, not a board member. Someone who can sit across from the engineers and tell me if they're actually doing what they say they're doing. She looked at him. 1 meeting. I pay you for the day. If you want nothing further to do with it, that's the end. He considered this. Would Lily have school that day? Victoria paused. Then, we can schedule it during the summer. Then I'll think about it. She nodded. She had not expected immediate yes, and she had not wanted one. She had learned something about this man, which was that his deliberateness was not obstruction. It was integrity. She filed this under things that are rare. They finished the food. She washed her hands at the shop sink, which amused her, and she let it show. He walked her to the Range Rover. Lily, Victoria said, before she got in. Does she have people, other than you? He looked at her. Something careful moved through his expression. She has her grandmother, her teachers, Marcus, who she's basically adopted. A pause. Why? She told me, another time, Victoria said. And I find that I think about it. He said nothing. She got in the car. Before she closed the door, she said, without looking at him, she's going to build something extraordinary someday. I know, he said. The Range Rover backed out of the lot and turned onto Delwood, and he stood in the late November cold watching the taillights until they were gone. March. The clocks had moved forward, and the light was lasting longer now, arriving at the shop earlier. Spreading in long, flat bars across the concrete floor, there were crocuses in the planter that Lily had put beside the bay door in October, now blooming yellow and white without anyone having arranged for it to happen. Daniel was at the bench when Lily arrived after school, which was its own kind of clock. He could tell the time of year by the angle of the light and the mood she walked in with, and this afternoon, the mood was bright, elevated, carrying the particular energy of a child who has been given a reason. Miss Moretti said my paper on combustion efficiency was the best science project she's seen from the 3rd grade, Lily announced, dropping her backpack. She said it wasn't exactly 3rd grade material, which I think was a compliment. It was a compliment, Daniel said. She also asked where I learned the thermodynamics part, and I said from you and from a book, and she said that tracks. Marcus looked up from the oil filter he was replacing. That definitely tracks. Lily climbed onto the stool she had claimed as hers beside the workbench and began removing papers from her backpack with the organized efficiency of someone who has watched a methodical person work for 8 years. She pulled out the graded paper, a large red star at the top. Daniel looked at it. He had a rule about not making too large a thing of her achievements because he did not want her to do work for approval. He wanted her to do work because the work was interesting. But he had a sec quietly and completely. He placed the paper on the shelf above the bench, between a shop lamp and a carburetor that he kept because it was from a 1967 Shelby Cobra and belonged to Ray Whitfield, who had asked him to hold on to it. Good, he said. Lily nodded, satisfied. This was the right response. She had learned to read it correctly. She was working on her math homework when the familiar sound of tires on the lot brought her head up. She knew the engine note by now, had learned it the way children learn the sound of a parent's car. She looked at her father. "Victoria's here," she said. He looked at the door. The black Range Rover was in the lot. Victoria came in carrying a folder and wearing a coat he had not seen before, lighter, the color of winter wheat, marking the shift in season. She had come to the shop 5 times since November. Each visit was nominally about something: the technical consulting question, a document she needed his review on, a question about a vehicle one of her portfolio company's clients had asked her about. Each visit was actually about something else that neither of them had named. "Hi, Lily," she said. "Hi," Lily said. She had stopped calling her the Ferrari lady in October, when Victoria had remembered, without prompting, that Lily had mentioned a book about aerodynamics, and arrived one visit later with a newer, more advanced edition. After that, she had been Victoria, which was different. Victoria set the folder on the bench and opened it. Inside were preliminary engineering assessments for the materials acquisition. She needed his read on 2 specific sections. They stood side by side at the bench, in the diminishing light of a March afternoon, and he read through the pages while she watched his face. She had learned to read his face, which was a skill she had not possessed in October, and she thought of it as a private achievement. "These numbers are off," he said, pointing to a figure in the second section. "Not fraudulently, they just haven't accounted for the thermal coefficient at scale. If they're manufacturing at volume, this tolerance is going to be too narrow." She made a note. "The rest is solid," he said. "The rest is solid," she repeated. "High praise. You wanted honest." "I did." She looked at him. "I'll reach out to their lead engineer on this point. I can put together a brief technical note, if that's easier." She looked at him. "You'd do that? It would take 20 minutes. "Then yes," she said. "Thank you." Lily, from her stool, was watching both of them with the placid scientific attention of someone recording a natural phenomenon. "You two should go to dinner sometime," she said, with perfect academic neutrality. A pause. "Lily," Daniel said. "What?" "You both like food. You've had lunch here 3 times. That's basically the same thing, except a restaurant is better." "That's not. I'm just observing," Lily said. She returned to her math homework. Victoria looked at the folder. Daniel looked at the wall. A very long 2 seconds elapsed. "She's not wrong," Victoria said, quietly. Not as a proposal, she was too careful for that, but as an acknowledgement that the thing they had both been very scrupulously not naming had, through the agency of an 8-year-old, just been named. "No," Daniel said. After a moment, "She usually isn't." Summer came to Hartfield in long, warm weeks, and the crocuses at the bay door gave way to marigolds that Lily planted with the same methodical attention she gave everything. The shop had not changed its sign. Daniel had turned down 2 separate offers to expand, one from a real estate developer who wanted to put a performance center in the old tire warehouse next door, and one from a media company that had somehow gotten his number and wanted to do a documentary about him. He had declined both calls in under 2 minutes, which Marcus had described as very on-brand. The shop had, in other ways, become something that had no clean category. There was a waiting list. There were vehicles in the lot on any given Tuesday that would have been unremarkable in Monaco. There were, occasionally, engineers who came not to drop off cars but to watch him work and ask questions, the way you go to see someone who knows a thing you want to understand. He was patient with them. He did not perform for them. He had been to Maranello once, for a 3-day technical consultation in June, and he had taken Lily. She had stood in the factory and been very still for a long time, the way she got when something was important. She had asked a question of one of the senior engineers about airflow management in the carbon fiber chassis process, and he had looked at her for a moment and then answered her seriously, which was the right response. On the last morning of the trip, standing in the factory floor while Lily was in the engineering library with a translator she had decided was her friend, Daniel had looked at the machinery and the light and the work happening around him and had felt not nostalgia exactly, because nostalgia is for things you wish you had returned to, and this was not that. It was something more like gratitude for a past that had given him the knowledge and a present that had given him the context for it. He had thought about Claire, about his wife, the way he always did when he was somewhere they had planned to return to together. He had thought about her without the old edge of it, which was not because the grief had diminished, but because grief, if you carry it long enough and honestly enough, changes shape without changing weight. He had thought, she would have liked seeing Lily in here, and that was enough. Victoria had not come to Italy. They had agreed, without discussing it much, that there were things to be let alone for now. She had, however, been at the shop on a Thursday evening in July when a thunderstorm blew in fast from the west, the kind that comes in low and fills the sky with purple. Lily had been trying to explain something to her about an experiment she was designing, a small-scale test of airfoil geometry she wanted to build from balsa wood and cardboard. Victoria had listened to all of it. She had asked a question at the end that was the right question, the kind that showed she had actually followed the explanation and not just waited politely for it to end. Lily had looked at her and said, "You understand that?" "A little," Victoria said. "No, actually," Lily said, with the forensic confidence of the young. "You understood it." "That's different." Outside, the rain was hard on the lot. Daniel had made coffee. The three of them sat in the shop while the storm moved through. Lily drawing diagrams on the back of a service receipt, Victoria asking questions and taking notes in her phone, Daniel listening and watching both of them and saying nothing. The way you say nothing when nothing needs to be said. There are lives that look small from the outside. From the outside, they look like a sign on a building that hasn't been repainted. A man who works without making a noise about it. A child who asks questions that are too large for her. A shop on an unremarkable street in an unremarkable town. From the outside, you can miss the whole thing. There are people who carry entire worlds quietly, who once built something that others drive at full speed without knowing his name, who chose to step out of the light not because they were pushed, but because something more important needed the room. There are men whose worth is not legible in their surroundings, whose knowledge is not announced, whose significance you will not understand until you slow down enough to actually look. Victoria Hale, who had spent a professional lifetime reading rooms and people and situations, had walked into a room in October and read it wrong. She had been wrong about the sign and the asphalt and the plastic chairs. She had not been wrong about the repair. The car had run perfectly. It still did. Lily finished her diagram. She held it up for both of them to see a small airfoil in pencil. Dimensions noted in the careful handwriting of someone who takes the numbers seriously. "What do you think?" she said. Daniel looked at it. "Build it," he said. Outside, the rain was already letting up. The clouds were moving east. The marigolds by the bay door were wet and bright, and the late sun was coming through the gap, turning everything on the wet lot to copper and gold. Lily was already reaching for the balsa wood. Sometimes, the person the whole world overlooked is the one standing behind the things it calls extraordinary. They do not announce themselves. They just do the work.